All right, today we're unpacking a source video that paints a pretty startling picture. It lays out a hypothetical war in the Middle East, a really controversial decision by India, and a claim that it all points to a dangerous new direction in the country's foreign policy. So, let's dive right in.
Okay, so picture this. A friendly warship visits your country. You hold joint naval exercises, you celebrate the crew, you call it a bridge of friendship. Then, just 2 weeks later, that same ship gets blown out of the water by a torpedo. And the official response from your government? Crickets. Total silence. That's the mystery right at the heart of the story we're looking at today.
So let's kick things off right where the source video does, with this deadly attack in the Indian Ocean that gets the whole ball rolling.
The source video lays out this timeline, and it's vast and it's shocking. On February 17, 2026, an Iranian warship, the Dana, is in India for a big naval exercise. The Indian Navy is even tweeting about bridges of friendship. But just 15 days later, that bridge seems to have burned down because the ship is torpedoed and sunk, allegedly by a U.S. submarine.
And we're not just talking about metal and machinery here. The human cost is staggering. The source says 87 Iranian sailors were killed. These were men who were literally marching in a parade in India just 2 weeks before.
And this is the response that becomes the absolute focus of the source video's argument, a tweet which it attributes to the BJP's official account that just says, "Not our business." It's just such a jarring contrast to all the celebration just a couple of weeks earlier.
Now, of course, an attack like this doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? The source video places it right in the middle of a much bigger, hypothetical war that's just spiraling out of control.
And the conflict it describes is just massive. The source claims U.S. and Israeli forces bomb over 2,000 targets inside Iran. They kill more than 1,000 people, even their supreme leader. But Iran, according to this, is hitting back hard, targeting 27 U.S. military bases and even striking the U.S. naval headquarters in Bahrain.
And then the conflict spills over into the economy. The source says Iran's ally Hezbollah jumps into the war, and Iran makes a huge strategic play. It shuts down the Strait of Hormuz. We're talking about the world's single most important route for oil, and they're threatening to set fire to any ship that even tries to get through.
If you want to understand just how big of a deal this is, you only need to know one number: 20%. A full 1/5 of the entire world's oil supply passes through that one tiny choke point. Shutting that down is like putting a clamp on the main artery of the global economy. And that brings us right to the heart of the source material's argument. The claim that India's silence in all of this is a radical, controversial break from everything it's done before.
Okay, so here's the crucial point. For decades, India has had this core foreign policy of strategic autonomy. Basically, it means they make their own calls, they refuse to just pick a side between major world powers. But the source video's whole argument is that this principle has just been completely thrown out the window. And to make its point, the source draws this really sharp contrast with the past. It talks about how leaders like Indira Gandhi would even criticize an ally like the USSR, how Atal Bihari Vajpayee condemned the U.S. invasion of Iraq, how Manmohan Singh spoke out against intervention in Libya, and it puts that right next to the current administration's alleged actions. Loud condemnation for Iran's attacks, but total silence on the U.S. and Israeli strikes.
And according to the video, the world is noticing. It uses this headline to kind of sum up the consequence, arguing that this new one-sided approach has cost India its important, balanced voice in a really critical part of the world.
But look, this isn't just some high-level geopolitical chess game. The source argues that the fallout from this policy shift hits people right where it hurts, in their wallets. Let's see how.
First off, you've got to understand the vulnerability here. With the Strait of Hormuz shut down, India's in a really tight spot. A huge 55% of its oil imports come from the Middle East. That means over half its supply is suddenly at risk.
Then things get, confusing. The source points to what it calls conflicting information about India's safety net, its oil reserves. It says a union minister claimed back in February that India had 74 days of oil stored up, but now the administration is supposedly saying there are only 25 days left. The source suggests that this kind of discrepancy just fuels the sense of crisis.
In this next part, this might be the single most damning piece of evidence the source presents for its claim that India has lost its autonomy. It quotes a U.S. official talking about the crisis who says, "We have given them permission to accept Russian oil." That one word, permission, is what the source really zeroes in on, framing it as a totally humiliating moment for a sovereign country.
So what's the bottom line for everyday people? The video boils all of this high-level international drama down to a single number, a 60 rupee price hike for a cooking gas cylinder, a direct hit on the household budget for millions of families.
Which, brings us to the final central question that the source video really wrestles with, which is simply, why? Why this supposed dramatic shift in policy?
So what's the explanation? Why, according to the source, would India completely surrender its independent foreign policy like this?
While the source puts forward a few different theories, and it's careful to attribute them to opposition leaders. One theory is that the Prime Minister is somehow compromised and has given in to the U.S. Another suggests the U.S. is using corruption charges against the businessman Adani as a form of blackmail. And then there's a third theory, that this isn't weakness at all, but a deliberate, calculated choice to fully align India's future with United States and Israel.
And so that's where the source video leaves us, with this really fundamental question. Is what it describes a smart pivot to a new strategic partnership, or is it, as the source argues so forcefully, a profound loss of the independence that has defined India on the world stage for decades? That is the question at the very heart of this.